I think the number of new entrants has slowed down, although I expect there'll be several more. But why don't we get started, since the first part is just preliminaries anyway. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rich Kravitz. I'm the director at UC Center Sacramento, also professor in the Med Center at UC Davis, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to this briefing on extreme heat and its effect on California homes and families. I think most of you know what UCCS does, but just as a quick recap, we provide experiential learning opportunities to undergraduate students throughout the UC system. Some of you on the legislative side have possibly hosted students in the past. If you haven't, it's a great opportunity both to transmit what you know about your topic area to help a young person grow and get some help with what you're doing on the policy side at the same time. So that's the end of the sales pitch. The other thing we do is try to share knowledge in the interest of better public policy making. And we normally do that through formal presentations, our Wednesday speaker series, but this is in a way a trial run in which there happened to be a serendipitous meeting of the minds between UCCS and Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and their partners. And we saw this as an opportunity to more directly convey some of the work that's been done, both inside and outside of the UC system with some legislative committee partners. So we're really, really glad that everybody can make it. We're grateful to the presenters as well as to all of the attendees. We're gonna run this fairly informally, and since there aren't too many of us here, I wonder if we could go around and just have brief introductions, just in the interest of time, if you wouldn't mind just stating your name and who you work for, basically, just so we know who's connected where. So why don't we start with UCCS staff. So again, I'm Richard Kravitz. I'm the director at UCCS. Cindy?
Yep, so Cindy Simmons, and I'm the Associate Director for UC Center Sacramento.
Sandra?
Hi, I'm Sandra Wilson, and I am an Advisor Outreach and Program Coordinator for UC Center Sacramento.
And Brooke?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Brooke Miller-Jacobs, the Event and Marketing Manager here at the Center. Welcome.
Okay, next let's turn to our presenting team, the scientists and community leaders who are presenting. Max, would you mind introducing yourself and then calling on the rest of the people on your team?
Sure. I'm Max Way. I work as a research scientist at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. I believe Ronan Levinson may be on the line. I'm not sure.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ronan. I lead the Heat Island group at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and I work closely with Max.
And then maybe we can go to Janice.
Janice,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Janice Matherin Boyd with West Fresno Family Resource Center, community-based nonprofit organization in the Central Valley.
Right. Then Kelly Turner, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kelly Turner. I'm a faculty in urban planning at UCLA, and I co-direct the Luskin Center for Innovation.
And I see another UCLA affiliate, Duane Miller.
Hi, Duane Miller, Senior Executive Director, UCLA Government and Community Relations.
Okay, and then why don't we take the Strategic Growth Council? Where did, Lynn, do you want to start, and then Elizabeth?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Lynn von Coakley-Bird. I'm the Executive Director of the Strategic Growth Council, and I am, as you can tell, have a bit of a frog in my throat, and so I will hand it over to Liz.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Grassi, and I manage the Climate Change Research Program for the Council.
And Gabrielle, could you introduce yourself and then maybe call on other Senate affiliates?
Sure. Hi, I'm Gabrielle Mindel with the Senate Environmental Quality Committee. And I also have on board Eric Walters, who is a consultant with the committee. And we might have one other, our science fellow this year, I think will be joining Jacob O'Connor.
Great, thank you. And Lawrence, could you do the honors on the assembly side?
Yes, Lawrence Lindblom. I'm the chief consultant for the Assembly Natural Resources Committee, which is chaired by Assembly Member Luz Rivas. And her personal staff is on the Zoom as well, and as Paige Brokaw, my colleague with the Natural Resources Committee.
Good, thank you. I know we missed Jim Hawley. Jim, do you want to say hello?
Oh, sure. Yeah, Jim Hawley, State and External Relations for Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Thank you.
Thanks. And are there others who either didn't get a chance to introduce themselves or were not introduced?
This is Rachel Ehlers. There are three of us here from the Legislative Analyst's Office, nonpartisan advisors to the legislature, myself, my colleague Ross Brown, and my colleague Lourdes Morales.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. Anybody else? Great. Well, we're glad to have you all here. Just a few notes of thanks. First to Jim Hawley and Max Way for helping us get this organized. To Gabrielle Mendel and Lawrence Lindblom for the work that they did on the legislative committee side in helping to make this event happen. And then in the center itself, Cindy Simmons, Sandra Wilson, and Brooke Miller-Jacobs in particular, who is our event manager and had to sort of pivot to coordinate a whole new kind of event. So thanks to all of you. All right, so one word about how things will unfold. We have some formal presentations planned. In between, depending on how the time flows, there may be an opportunity for clarification questions, but we've also set aside a full half hour at the end for a robust question and answer and discussion period. Just be aware that although the discussion at the end will not be recorded, the informal questions and answers that occur in between individual talks will be recorded. So anything you say will be available for public viewing. So just keep that in mind. And so now, without further ado, let's launch into the formal program. It's a pleasure to introduce the Strategic Growth Council Executive Director, Lynn von Koch-Liebert. So Lynn, thank you for being here and take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Kravitz, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm just really excited to have the opportunity to share more about the climate change research program with you. We see at SGC this program as a key tenet of our ground-up community-led transformation vision, and this is what drives all aspects of our key administrative goals. And in today's case, this is really focused on extreme heat and environmental justice. Now, I do want to note that the CCR program is unique in that it's one of the only programs in the state that requires funded community partnership from the outset. And this is done to ensure that the research is leading to near-term outcomes for communities. So this approach has served as a model for other research programs within the state and even our philanthropic and federal funding partners. So I will now turn it over to Liz Grassi, who is our CCR program manager, to talk through some of the finer points around this innovative and impactful program. Over to you, Liz.
Great, thank you. Am I not muted? Whenever I do this, I always forget to unmute myself.
All good.
Let me just start this. So Lynn's really covered most of what I wanted to talk to you about today. I just wanted to share a real brief couple of highlights of the program for you. This program was gifted by the legislature to the council. It asked us to establish a plan, do a competitive basis research grant program that was eligible to California research institutions. So it's very unique in that it is this open competitive process. We've funded projects that have really allowed our researchers to explore critical research gaps, examine practical applications that benefit the communities. So this is just a quick program snapshot. We have 20 projects. We funded 25 institutions. We have 97 non-academic partners, 20 pilots conducted, and have 7 climate tools that are resulting from our work. So today we'll be talking a little bit about extreme heat. We do have 4 projects that we are funding right now. And I think the great thing to kind of look at around these projects is that we really cover a lot of issues through these different projects that are all really focused on extreme heat that started in 2018 when it wasn't really talked about like it's being talked about now. So these projects, they focus on heat resilience in disadvantaged community. They ensure a wide range of extreme heat related issues are prioritized for communities and local decision makers are addressed, and that they have maximal impact to policy, community resilience, and technology deployment. So with that, this is my favorite kind of illustration that I thought you would all appreciate. The value of science isn't easy to understand or to promote, but it really is essential to evaluating the efforts and investments that we make in combating climate and the effects of climate, as well as just our equity goals. So now I'm really pleased to hand it over to Kelly Turner, Professor Turner, who's conducting some innovative extreme heat research. I think you'll agree that these projects that we funded are valuable to the state's effort around combating the effects of climate and advancing our vision at SGC to support healthy, vibrant, and resilient communities. With that, stop sharing.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for making time to be here today. My name is Kelly Turner. I'm a faculty in urban planning and geography. I also co-direct the Luskin Center of Innovation, which I will be representing here today. And my work focuses on planning, policy, and designing communities that are heat resilient for the future. I'm also a member of the Arst Rockefeller Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance. So I've been thinking a lot about heat, and I'm just honored today to have the chance to talk to you today. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with the Luskin, next slide, please. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Luskin Center for Innovation, we're an environmental policy and planning research center housed in the Luskin School of Public Affairs. And our mission is to unite scholars with civic leaders to solve environmental challenges that confront California, but also the nation and the rest of the world. Next slide, please. Increasingly, our research portfolio has included a lot of climate adaptation work and especially centering equitable solutions to extreme heat. I have several bullet points here showing the variety of research initiatives we have on equitable solutions to extreme heat, most of which has been funded generously through the Strategic Growth Council's Climate Change Research Program. Today, most of what I will share with you, though, is following on a report that we released this fall on California heat policy and doing a gap analysis of what the existing regulations and funding opportunities are for addressing heat in California. Next slide, please. In this report targeted vulnerable communities, which we defined as those that are both exposed and places where exposure occurs among sensitive groups. And so we looked at where people spend most of their time and which groups, either because of their sort of physical sensitivity or because of the activities that they're engaged in, are likely to become sensitive to extreme heat. Next slide, please. And these are the settings that we came up with. They are not the only places where folks are exposed to extreme heat, but this is where we have done a deep dive in terms of our policy analysis. And today I'm going to focus in on the residential home setting. Next slide. So this is a setting where the majority of the time is spent for most people. And it's also a setting where those who are already vulnerable, like older adults and infants, are exposed to extreme heat, as well as those who have limited mobility and a capacity to go somewhere else if their homes are too hot. Currently, there's no statewide requirement for maintaining indoor temperatures at sufficiently cool levels. Also, for those who rent, air conditioning is not considered mandatory, unlike heating. And then finally, the Cal Green Code, which has measures related to heat reduction, such as cool roof and shade. Those measures are voluntary, not mandatory, and they also apply only to new construction or additions and expansions. Next slide, please. So what you see here is an example. We've done this for each setting, but this is an example of the output in our report for the residential setting. And there's a lot of information on this particular slide, but what I'd like you to take away from this today is that there are many different programs that could potentially influence aspects of residential heat. And there are many different funding opportunities, but they are spread across different departments, different agencies, different funding opportunities, and in some cases, they're actually missing. Next slide, please. So I'd like to provide a few in-depth examples of how policy and funding gaps could be addressed. First, we could be updating our building standards for a hotter future. So I mentioned earlier that air conditioning is not considered a mandatory provision for landlords to tenants, unlike heating. Legislatures could require the state's Department of Housing and Community Development to develop a proposal for the California Building Commission for mandatory building standards and require that tenants have access to a cooling device, such as a window air conditioning unit, or even a full HVAC system. We recognize the Assemblymember Bloom and the other co-authors who recently introduced AB 2597, which would do just that. The state also has an opportunity to use next year's update to the California Building Standards Code to require certain treatments to reduce heat exposure, such as shade or better insulation in new and remodeled homes. Currently, cooling devices, including air conditioning units, are optional and not required and only apply to new and remodeled homes, not existing homes occupied by tenants. A second large opportunity bucket would be to fill program and funding gaps to ensure that there's a coordinated and comprehensive suite of incentive programs available so that all households have an opportunity to have healthy homes and resilient homes. This could include expanding program offerings, eligibility, incentive levels, funding, community-based outreaches for programs that incentivize lower income households that need healthy homes. Example incentive programs could provide affordable air conditioning, home weatherization treatments, trees, and other shade structures, utility finance assistance as well. For example, there's no state program that allows low-income households to afford or have or use air conditioning, and thus some suffer when it's triple-digit temperatures outside. Other incentives could better exist for cool home materials like cool roofs and walls, and I'll flag this with an upcoming slide. We want to recognize legislation also from Assemblymember Rivas calling for coordination through an interagency task force that would help coordinate and address gaps in the residential and other settings. And last, but certainly not least, there's a need to address gaps in our policy levers. For instance, residents in mobile homes and the unhoused cannot be protected by existing policy mechanisms like building codes, and we rely on those to ensure Californians are safe in their home. So I'll give you an example from the Coachella Valley. Next slide. So this is an example from some work that is ongoing, funded by the Strategic Growth Council, and we are examining mobile homes in the East Coachella Valley. So Palm Springs, which regularly reaches summer high temperatures of 105 degrees Fahrenheit or 40 degrees Celsius, recently passed Municipal Code R30311, establishing an 80 degree Fahrenheit or 27 degrees Celsius high temperature threshold for a room to be considered habitable in new construction. So in August of 2021, the Luskin Center recorded indoor air temperatures in mobile homes in nearby Thermal and Oasis, California, specifically Mountain View Estates and the Oasis mobile homes. And this was on a 111 Fahrenheit or 44 degrees Celsius day. These communities have similar temperature conditions to Palm Springs, but a poverty rate of over 50% and a population predominantly employed as agricultural laborers. The indoor air temperatures without air conditioners were well above the Palm Springs habitability threshold all day. And you can see that the habitability threshold is the first dotted line, the lower dotted line, and the indoor air without air conditioning temperature is the orange line. In fact, if you look at the peak outdoor temperature that day, which was 44 degrees C, the dotted line on the top, you can see that actually the indoor air temperature exceeded outdoor air temperature maximums on that day. So it's clear to see why the residents that we surveyed in this community rated air conditioning as by far the most important cooling strategy in their arsenal. Next slide. You'll hear more about the use of cool surfaces from our colleagues at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab in a moment, but we wanted to spotlight a series of cool art installations in Los Angeles that we organized using solar reflective materials to cool buildings and raise awareness about heat in the city. The first mural on the right, Blue Zeus by Eric Skotnes, was installed in South LA, and the second on the left, Beat the Heat by Christy Sandoval, was installed at Fernangeles Elementary School. Green Together Collaborative in Pacoima and the Trust for Public Land just announced 3 more solar reflective murals to be installed in the Pacoima Sun Valley TCC neighborhood. Next slide. So today we're focusing on the residential setting, but effectively addressing heat in this or other settings where exposure occurs requires the right foundational framework. Thus, I'd like to conclude with some overall recommendations. First, we'd hope that the state could recognize heat science and governance as rapidly emerging. We need frameworks to guide and prioritize action and evaluate success using salient, human-centered metrics to improve action in the future. Currently, the state's draft heat action plan does not include well-defined goals and performance metrics that are measurable to guide investment priorities. Without this, there's not a clear path for tracking progress, accountability, or taking stock of lessons from early action to guide future investments. Yet, evaluation and accountability in heat funding from the state budget is essential. So what could some of these goals and metrics be? The state could approach extreme heat as a public health crisis and a climate resilience challenge. This would mean taking a human-centric approach with a focus on public health and welfare goals and metrics that could guide human-centric actions to achieve health and welfare benefits, especially for the most vulnerable. Third, we recommend that this be equity-centered, prioritizing funding to help those most vulnerable to extreme heat. We will soon at Luskin Center be releasing a mapping tool that can help the state do just that, using a suite of different state programs. But that suite of state programs does need to be expanded and improved. Currently, the draft heat plan points to a lot of existing programs, but these programs treat heat mitigation as a co-benefit. Currently, there's no dedicated program or funding opportunity explicitly for heat risk reduction. We have an opportunity now to take direct, targeted approach that focuses on settings where Californians are most vulnerable. What the legislature budgeted last year for a new program is a down payment, and more will be required. Finally, I'd like to refer you to our most recent report on the state's heat-related policy program and funding gaps. After analyzing California's patchwork of regulations and funding sources, we conclude that there are a lot of gaps, many risks that could be mitigated that have slipped through the cracks. There's no central body for coordinating and managing efforts. So importantly, I want to recognize that Assemblymember Luz Rivas and co-sponsors have introduced AB 2076, which seeks to address this fact and appropriately calls for an entity within the governor's office, OPR, to play that role. This is important because a comprehensive, coordinated, and adequately funded response is essential for public health. Next slide. So with that, I would like to direct you to our website and specifically our report that addresses the broader funding gaps in state level policies and opportunities, as well as provide you with my contact information should you have any follow-up after this meeting. Thank you so much.
So thanks, Dr. Turner. That you finished almost 3 minutes under schedule. So we do have time for clarification questions if there are any. And If not, we can just move on to the next part of the program, but we have a little gap that we can make available. Okay. Well, Liz, were you going to introduce the next speaker?
I absolutely can. Dr. Max Way is with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. He is one of our round 1 grantees, and I've just been really impressed with Max and his willingness and excitement about really getting community involvement in his CalThrives tool. He was one of the folks who actually participated in our research symposium back in the before times in 2019, where we got together academics with local government, state government, and community-based folks to really talk about research and how it affects these different groups. And I was taken with how impacted he was, and he came afterwards and really thanked me and really talked about how it had really influenced the research that he's doing. So with that, Max, thank you so much for your hard work, and go for it.
Thank you so much, Liz. And I really want to thank the Strategic Growth Council Climate Change Research Program for their support and funding. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, so thank you again to committee and staff members, members of the LAO, and Cindy, Brooke, Sandra, and Richard for all of your organizing efforts. We really appreciate the opportunity to present on our work here today. So I'll be describing CalThrives, which is a California toolkit for heat resilience in underserved environments. I'm a research scientist in the Sustainable Energy and Environmental Systems Department at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. Okay, so just some background and objectives. And I think that this is fairly complementary talk to Professor Turner's talk. So extreme heat now causes more deaths than hurricanes, tornadoes, or floods in most years. And it's important to note that it is the most costly climate change impact in California by 2050, primarily through increased human mortality. So for this project, our key research objectives include developing a methodology to model heat resilience at neighborhood scale, to quantify resilience benefits of passive, that is to say, non-energy consuming measures, and active measures, that is to say, those that consume energy during extreme heat waves in a disadvantaged community, and to develop a set of toolkit items to help disadvantaged community residents better cope with extreme heat. So heat is increasingly brutal in California's Central Valley, where low incomes, poor air quality, old homes, and high utility bills kind of converge to disadvantage many residents. So the Central Valley and Fresno are hot and are getting hotter, with a projected increase to 22 extreme heat days by mid-century, 55 by the end of the century. And this represents an increase from a historical number of 4 extreme heat days per year. So there are large differences in the annual distribution of heat, that is to say, chronic versus acute heat, with about twice as many very hot to extremely hot days in Fresno and Ontario, or inland areas, for example, than in coastal areas such as Los Angeles and Oakland, with 50 to 100 times more days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So there's a lot of information on this slide, but I just wanted to make 3 key points. The first is that the definition of an extreme heat day varies by location in California. So it's 106.1 degrees in Fresno and almost 20 degrees lower in Oakland at 88.4. So it's defined as the 98th percentile of the historical distribution of high daily temperatures. The second point is that the number of very hot days, that is to say, days which are within 5 degrees Fahrenheit of extreme heat, are much higher in the central areas such as Fresno and Ontario, about twice as high in Fresno, Ontario than on the coast. And finally, that there is a much larger frequency of days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the Central Valley. And that Fresno is chronically hot, so the number of days greater than 100 degrees Fahrenheit have increased by 21% since historical values to an average of 45 days per year. And there's actually a record number of days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit this past year in 2021 at 69. And so if there's a very hot temperature, a heat wave of 105 on the coast, then that's a much rarer event, and that's more of an acute event. So I just wanted to highlight those differences. The good news is that we can implement preventative strategies now to mitigate heat health impacts. And the CalTARS project has developed a toolkit for local and state stakeholders. So a few things that can be done are increasing awareness of heat-related vulnerability, and this is important in those areas that are not so used to heat. Identifying areas that are vulnerable to extreme heat events. And then in the nearer term, to remedy the built environment, such as building retrofit measures and increases to the tree canopy, as well as enhancing community and home cooling programs. So our heat resilience toolkit incorporates both community inputs and science, so community engagement through community meetings, focus groups, and phone interviews were a large component of the project, as well as both neighborhood scale building modeling and some outdoor measure modeling. These feed into our heat resilience toolkit, and some elements of that include community cooling guide, some fact sheets, a heat vulnerability index tool, and the focus of our talk today will be policy and program recommendations. So just a few points to highlight are that we highlight we find several key vulnerabilities for residents in disadvantaged communities in South Fresno. Over 70% are uncomfortably hot at home very often during the summer. And residents on the top floors and those residents in units that lack air conditioning, estimated to be about 15% of homes, are especially vulnerable. So we see old and inefficient window air conditioners, for example. We see swamp coolers, so these are really insufficient to provide adequate cooling during heat waves in Fresno. In terms of passive measures, or those that do not consume electricity or energy, we find that window films, roof and ceiling insulation, and cool walls are among the most effective passive measures, and that natural ventilation or opening your windows to admit cooler air at night are especially helpful on top floors. So this is just a plot of the distribution of responses across two neighborhoods, or actually one neighborhood in Fresno. So this represents about 600 homes, with higher values providing more protection from extreme heat and less protection at lower values. All right, I'll shift to policy and program recommendations. The first is to note that heat island countermeasures such as cool roofs, cool walls, and shade trees provide fail-safe cooling and can be 5 to 10 times more effective indoors than outside. So the benefit of some of these measures is much greater when you're inside than outside. And so we propose more stringent requirements for cool walls and cool roofs when roofs need replacement and when homes need to be repainted, because the incremental costs are the additional cost is very small. Secondly, that California's building standards should be upgraded to promote extreme heat solutions based on human outcomes. That is to say, outcomes that minimize death, illness, and misery, or a term DIM that I coined with my colleague Ronan. So California's Title 24 Energy and Green Building Standards currently focus on energy, carbon, and cost savings. And standards should really reward improvements to thermal safety, comfort, and productivity. We need to pilot and demonstrate these promising passive and active cooling measures to determine what works best for residents. So I've highlighted a few of the passive measures that are very promising: solar control window films, for example, cool walls. And in terms of active measures, ceiling fans are very helpful. And in some cases, mini split air conditioners or heat pumps can be very beneficial. And we can go into more discussion on that if people have questions. Also, to guide California's future investments, extreme heat mitigation programs should dedicate resources to monitoring outcomes. So we really should try to learn what works by measuring reductions in temperature, heat stress, illness, hospitalization, and deaths, and also improvements to health, comfort, productivity, and learning. We also need more equitable definitions of extreme heat and heat waves. So I plotted here the daily high temperatures in 2021 in Fresno. There's a record number of days greater than 100 degrees at 69, which exceeds projections for 2040. And there are 9 heat waves of greater than 100 degrees Fahrenheit shown here by these clusters. But only 16 of the 69 days would be classified as an extreme heat day per the location-specific definition for extreme heat in Fresno. And only one of the 9 waves would be counted as a heat wave using the extreme heat day definition, which is 4 days exceeding this threshold. So I think the state can consider fixed value definitions for extreme heat and or extreme heat waves, such as 4 or more days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, in addition to location dependent thresholds for extreme heat days. So in this case, there are 9 and 11 days of average temperatures at 104 degrees, but those would just be considered as business as usual. We also need mechanisms to ensure adequate cooling in existing homes, especially low income and DAC areas with older buildings. So most of the homes in Southwest Fresno are older single family homes. And we need mechanisms other than new building codes because there's very little new construction in single family homes in Fresno and in some of these areas. So such as expanding existing weatherization programs and requiring adequate cooling on home point of sale. Expanding weatherization audits, which is very well developed for energy efficiency to include climate resilience, is recommended for identifying homes most in need of heat resilience upgrades. So these would expand the scope of existing energy efficiency audits, and auditors would clearly need additional training and well-defined protocols. And additional home audit checklists here might include testing AC system operation, collecting additional demographic information, and noting important risk factors for overheating. All of this could feed into a heat vulnerability index score to identify those most in need for interventions such as home cooling upgrades. Also, I think as been noted by Kelly, by Professor Turner, all homes should have a minimum cooling standard or equivalently a maximum indoor temperature allowed, which I think was at 80 degrees in Palm Springs. So similarly to what was shown earlier, our research shows that homes without an air conditioner get dangerously hot and increasingly so with climate change. So approaching 106 degrees Fahrenheit in Fresno without an air conditioner. And that minimum cooling standards would avoid these dangerous situations and prevent worst case heat exposure. There are various policy options, including new building codes and habitability requirements for existing homes. And specific requirements in this case could be set by consensus process similar to the Title 24 approach. In terms of very hot climate like Fresno, all homes without compressive AC unit should be able to get at least one air conditioner or heat pump that provides cooling to safely withstand extreme heat waves. So again, we find that many homes in Fresno lack air conditioning and only have swamp coolers, which are inadequate for extreme heat. Again, this is just modeling worst case heat wave in red, showing that a swamp cooler has much less cooling capacity than air conditioners. And that homes without an air conditioner in Fresno and other hot climates should be prioritized for upgrades to receive an air conditioner or heat pump unit. But it's important to note that increased use of cooling will increase electricity consumption, and additional financial assistance may be needed to avoid residents paying higher utility bills. Finally, more research and development is needed to support resilient, equitable decarbonization. So non-energy metric development such as health metrics and quantification of those health impacts are needed to support codes and standards development, the monitoring of installed measures and their effectiveness. Also, the development of a more comprehensive climate assessment is an opportunity to consolidate separate audits and assessments and streamline the burden to residents. And finally, there's a need for greater capability decision support tools for larger scale deployments. So something like a tool for energy efficiency, like Home Energy Saver, that could be deployed for extreme heat and climate resilient buildings. So thank you again very much for the opportunity to share our work. I'd like to thank again SGC and our research partners, West Fresno Family Resource Center, DSHA Consulting, and University of Southern California.
Yeah, well, thank you, Max and Kelly. Both of your presentations really are testimony to how academics can sometimes create presentations that are truly policy focused. As a non-expert, I was just very impressed with the clarity of both presentations. Max, and I hope our legislative partners were as well. Max, would you care to introduce our next speaker?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
So as Liz Grassi mentioned, I was very happy to have the opportunity to work with a community-based organization in Fresno, the West Fresno Family Resource Center. And in particularly, I've been working a lot closely with Janice Matherin, who is a project director there, and she's led a lot of initiatives to help the community in terms of health. She started a new project with HUD. She's been very supportive of our work on heat resilience in Fresno. So I just wanted to give Janice an opportunity to share some of her perspectives and some of her experiences from Fresno.
Okay, thank you, Max. Okay, let me share my slides. Okay, so I hit this. Share. Okay, slideshow. Okay, you see this? Can everyone see my slide? Okay.
Great.
Well, good afternoon. I am honored to be among such remarkable people who are doing remarkable work and research to address critical issue that impacts our community, vulnerable communities like Southwest Fresno. And so thank you, Max, and all of the others from the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and working with you and Susan and all of your other teammates. So we're delighted. So let's see here. So I just want to give you a brief overview if you're not quite familiar with the Southwest Fresno area and the community-based organization, West Fresno Family Resource Center. So we're a community benefit organization that serves more than 5,000 residents, annually in Southwest Fresno. The organization was formed and developed in 2001 to address health disparities. I must say we don't by any means provide any kind of clinical services. We do, however, work in partnership with institutions, research institutions, government agencies, the Fresno County Department of Public Health, hospitals, educational institutions. In fact, we serve as a learning, Dr. Kravitz, as you put in a plug earlier, we serve as a site for internships. So we provide internship opportunities for students at Fresno State, UCSF. We've even had physicians who are working on their doctorate degrees to come and actually do some work in the community. And so we provide a lot of hands-on experience, practical hands-on experience that would otherwise not be received. And it complements the work, from the classroom theory. And so, our work centers community voice to lead and implement solutions that have demonstrated impact on the lives of the community. One of those being, extreme heat, environmental justice. Our mission, the mission of the organization, is to empower and support the community to achieve optimal health and well-being. And we do that through a number of ways. We do, education, advocacy, engagement, a host of other areas. So West Fresno Family Resource Center is recognized as a HUD designated Envision Center to provide the Southwest Fresno neighborhood with centralized support following 4 pillars that are central in our work: economic empowerment, educational leadership, health and wellness, and character and leadership. And organization stands on a long legacy of grassroots advocacy, and we consider ourselves as its trusted source of neighborhood services. We serve as a bridge. We consider ourselves a bridge between the community and traditional institutions, even the public health. We work with communities that are hard to reach. We've developed trusted relationships, with those communities. So it makes us, ideal for the partnership with the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab to support the development of heat resiliency toolkits to support, those communities. So background info on Fresno, and I'm sure you're all pretty much aware of, Fresno. We're ranked the 5th largest city in California, home to about over 527,000+ residents in the Central Valley. We're a rich agricultural community, rich in agriculture. However, there's a high concentration of poverty. And I heard one of the earlier presenters, talked about their inclusion of farm workers, farm laborers, it's represented in the community that we serve. 42% of residents live in poverty. 30% of residents, they lack high school diploma. 88% of residents live in neighborhoods that are above the 50th percentile of economic distress. Lack of affordable housing remains a critical risk factor for many families. And I'm going to share some numbers. I live in the Bay Area, when we say the median rent, increased by 24% in last year. But according to the Fresno Association of Realtors, the median rent for a 2-bedroom apartment is $1,420. And for 1 bedroom is $1,141. For many, this might seem, particularly if you live in the Bay Area, it might seem, wow, that's all. But for communities where people are poor, they live in poverty, and their wages, they're actually literally have poverty wages. Their wages consumes a lot of their household income. So nearly 70% of very low income households spend more than half of their income on rent. And approximately 47% of households in Fresno are paying more than 30% of their income on housing. So a little background on the Southwest Fresno community and community that we serve. So there are a little over 50,000 residents in Southwest Fresno. And Southwest Fresno covers a land mass of about, I think, 163 square miles. High poverty, unemployment, health, seems to be a huge challenge. And in fact, that's why their organization was formed through a coalition of residents, healthcare providers, and the like. The median household income in Southwest Fresno is only $26,000 versus $41,000 in the city of Fresno. As I mentioned, lack of quality, affordable housing, poor community health, burdens of pollution, multiple sources of pollution, both air and water quality impacts the community of Southwest Fresno. So our partnership with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab to support the development of their heat resiliency toolkit for vulnerable population, is ideal. So that included supporting the research team in identifying heat-related issues within the neighborhood, collecting field data through, initially a plan was to do home visit, but of course, COVID impacted, all of our work. And so it was relegated to more or less phone surveys, conducting community meetings. And actually some of the community meetings that we conducted were just before the COVID hit. And so there were contributions from community members. I know Max also did a couple of community meetings afterwards where his information is included in the report. So affordability is an issue. And, the data that I shared earlier about poverty. So affordability issue for how can people in Southwest Fresno, a community where we are experiencing extreme heat, people have to make economic choices to resort into discomfort and will not turn on, you hear stories of, it's hot, but I will not turn on the AC. So, I talked about equating that to having a cake, you're in a diet and there's a cake on your table. And so you have access to AC in your home for those who have air conditioning, but people will not turn it on because they're not able to pay the high rates. Considering, last year we had 69 days, of 100+ degrees. So, of course, their care program that provides assistance through PG&E provides assistance, discounts of 20% or more to help families with electricity. That is available. It's still is tough on folks who have economic challenges. And so I looked at some of their qualifications for being part of the care program. And so qualifications is, 1 to 2 people in a household with a base earning of $34,000 or less, and so on. It's just more or less reiterating some of their challenges that people in our community are confronted with, extreme heat being a public health crisis for the population that we serve. Some populations are more exposed to more, socioeconomic vulnerability. So people like the elderly, infants, children, pregnant women, laborers that work outdoors, all of those things play a big role. And older adults with, underlying conditions, have respiratory issues, cardiovascular disease, and other chronic and mental health diseases are impacted. Additionally, we had the COVID, which compounded difficulties, which exacerbated the pandemic. People were isolated in their homes and, couldn't venture too far. So some of the solutions, and I'm no scientist, and so these may be like wish lists of things, a combination of things that I think that would be very helpful. So more opportunities for more efficient units, incentives for owners, as many of residents that live in the community actually are renters. They rent multi-units. They live in multi-units. So incentives for owners of these multi-unit rebates that can translate into lower AC costs for renters. Max and I, we talked about their natural ventilation, which is a problematic, is problematic in itself. Southwest Fresno, it's a community with, high crime concerns, not to mention the air quality concerns, in their community. One of the things that I would love to be able to see is the different rates, statewide. There is the changes from the rates that are charged statewide. And so areas where there are more heat We'd love to be able to see if the state can change their different rates, allocate different rates for different regions. So communities that get hotter have reduced rate because there's more consumption when compared to northern and coastal community. And how can more solar be deployed to help, FRESNO residents where they don't have to invest into getting a huge mortgage or, something that's innovative to that can be utilized. And I believe that's it for me. Yep.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Janice, for really bringing to the fore the idea that though extreme heat is something we're all struggling with, some populations are for sure struggling more than others. And it's an important point to keep in mind from a policy perspective. I think as we move into the discussion section, we'll now stop the video recording. Is that correct?